Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, sir.
All right, sweet. Hey, thanks everyone for watching. I'm going to apologize about the live stream yesterday. It was a disaster. Great conversation still, but I've got temporary internet services working, so hopefully this one goes better. But today I've got John Molnar and Phil Labonte both back on for the third time. How you doing today, John?
Doing good. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wearing your shirt, and the green screen does some psychedelic shit with it, so it's pretty cool. You should get some high tech shirts next time.
Right? Make that the new branding on the next run, whenever that is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then we got Phil Labonte back on. How you doing, Phil?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me.
So we are going to talk about godlessness and atheism in the liberty movement. But first off, there's an interesting similarity between you guys. You both have left the state, or John's about to leave the state he's living in. And Phil, you just left New Hampshire, moved out to Texas. Phil moved out to Texas because he's worried about the country ending. And John left Utah because they're banning porn. No, I'm just kidding. That's not why he left. I had to throw that in there.
Reason enough. Totally legitimate reason. No kink shaming.
No. But John, why are you? I had to throw that in there. I couldn't help it. But why are you really leaving Utah? What's going on?
A whole bunch of reasons. I mean, I left California. That's my original home state. I left it for good back in 2017. I'm seeing a lot of the similar stuff that had me leave California happening in Utah. And with that, my wife having lupus, it doesn't do good with the cold. I hate the cold anyways because I'm a California boy with Greek blood. So I need somewhere warm.
Where are you heading to?
We're heading out to Florida, someplace where we can get some land and be within 15 to 30 minutes of the beach.
Yeah, and way more open than California. Seems like they're not being quite as tyrannical over there. So
yeah, exactly. It's like one of the freest states during all of COVID. So that was a good indication of where we should probably look at moving to.
Yeah. And then, Phil, we talked about it a little bit the first time you were on, but just for the new subscribers, it even says it in your Twitter handle why you moved to Texas, but just give us an abridged version of why you did that.
The long and short of it is, I'm concerned about federal legislation and stuff, and I'm hoping that the Texas government will interpose itself between the federal government and the citizens of Texas. I think that it's more likely that Texas will do that than New Hampshire. No offense to New Hampshire or anything. I think that New Hampshire's great. I still got a house there. I'm going back multiple times this year to go and spend time with family and stuff, but New Hampshire, there's a lot of people real close, and if you're one of those people like me that are a touch on the doomer side, being around that many people, having that many people that close makes your hair kind of stand on end a little bit. So I was like, it might be a good idea to go ahead and get away from such a densely populated area. Even though my place in New Hampshire is still, out in the woods, it's like we're really cut off from the rest of the country between Boston, Massachusetts, New York. I mean, the whole 95 corridor really does kind of cut you off from the rest of the country. So you're kind of like a little island of liberty surrounded by Canada and, some of the most tyrannical states in the country. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm from New Hampshire and I moved out to Utah. So maybe that was the wrong move if you're asking John. So I don't know. Well, maybe all three of us will end up in Texas eventually. But yeah, right after you moved there, they had that power outage, right? That was like right after you got there.
Yeah. People blamed me. They're like, you brought the winter with you. I'm like, eat my ass. I didn't bring anything. I was trying to get away from it. And I was here for a week and it was nice before it actually all hell broke loose. And it was pretty rough for like a week or whatever. And thankfully I didn't have any significant problems, like my power didn't go out, I didn't, water didn't explode into my apartment or anything like that. I have noticed that there's a lot of cracks in the brand new concrete, because the building that I live in is a new construction. It was like, I'm the first person to live in this apartment, and so all the concrete and stuff was all brand new, and now there's a lot of cracks that they probably didn't expect to have 6 months ago because of the freezing and stuff. But it's behind us now. It's getting warmer, and I'm gonna enjoy the heat while I'm down here. I don't mind it.
There you go. So I've known both of you guys for a little while. I met you, John, last August, I think, when Spike Cohen came out to Salt Lake City. Yeah. And I knew you were an atheist right away, because I remember right at the event there, you were saying, like, I'm a staunch atheist, but I'm the only one telling people they should be allowed to go to church if they want to. Yeah, and then Phil, I think just before I had you on, I was just researching more about you, and I saw you were an atheist then, and we talked about it a little bit the first time you were on the show. But for all the subscribers who are new, I am also an atheist, and all three of us are obviously libertarians. So I thought this would be an interesting conversation to have. So I figured we'd just open up by shortly explaining what exactly that means to each of us, because it might be slightly different. So I'll go first. I'll just try to make it short. To me, atheism just means the lack of belief in theism. So like a personal God. I don't believe in Yahweh or Allah. I just don't believe in any figure like that. To me, the more vague your claim is about what you believe God to be, the more possible it is that it's true. So if you're going to say that you believe in some sort of higher power or something, that's such a vague claim that I don't even really have any criticisms of it, because your guess is as bad as mine. I don't know. But if you're going to start getting super specific about dates and historical events and future events and what you have to do specifically to go certain places, that's where you start to lose me. I really compare it to aliens. Like if you're going to say you think there's life out there, okay, that's such a, an open-ended claim. I don't really know. But if you're going to say like there are aliens on Mars who are 11 feet tall and they have 7 arms and they fly back and forth to Pluto every 3, you're getting really specific. So I'm going to kind of require some further evidence of that. So I'm not I think people conflate atheism with like anti-theism, or the confirmed belief that the idea of a God is impossible. And that's certainly not me. I take things kind of at face value, and I require evidence to believe things that are, especially extraordinary claims. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and I just have not been compelled to believe in any sort of God by anything I've seen or any arguments I've heard. So, John, why don't you just give us what is it you believe exactly?
So pretty much the same thing. There's just no God that I believe in. I haven't seen any proof of it. I haven't seen anything that makes me believe one way or the other. I'm not a big fan of belief, just kind of in general, because it takes away any type of reason or actual observations. Belief is just expecting something to exist, so to speak. You're taking it on faith, and that's not something that I'm a big fan of. So it's got to be something tangible to me, something that I can experience, something I can see or feel. And there just hasn't been anything in my life whatsoever to give me that indication that there's some type of God out there that exists, that cares about everything I do in my daily life and what's going to happen to me at the end of it. I mean, there's higher power. Absolutely. I can get behind that. I think higher power can be defined when it gets to the point of something that affects me, but I can't affect it. Absolutely. I think there's stuff like that exists. The sun would be a perfect example of that. If I die, nothing happens to the sun. If the sun dies, something happens to me. There's some higher powers out there that have influence over me. But as far as an actual God, I'm not buying it.
What about you, Phil?
I mean, I think that my estimation probably very closely resembles both of you guys. I don't imagine that there is a personal God that you can have a relationship with. I do think that when it comes to terms like believe, I think that Jordan Peterson's understanding of it is extremely interesting. When someone asks him, do you believe in God? Like, he was like, well, what do you mean by believe? And it's like, if you behave in a certain way, that's the best indicator of what you believe. And if there is no overarching personal God, or God that interacts on a personal level with people, then morality is something that man creates. Like, I know it's very Nietzschean, but it's something that man creates. So you behave in a way that, to behave in a way that is quote unquote good, tends to line up with what your culture kind of dictates, but also there's a certain amount of innate, I feel like, innate behavior. Like, people tend to be revulsed by real violence, right? Like, if people start fighting in an area, a lot of times people will go and try and break it up. If you see something happen where someone, accidents where there's, car accidents and people are hurt really bad, that kind of violent action. I know it's not a violence by someone else, but it's still a violence that can happen to you. People are kind of revulsed by that. And I think that when you behave like that, it shows more clearly what you believe than what you say, because we'll lie to ourselves and make stuff up and say things in different ways depending on who we're talking to and stuff. But our behavior doesn't really lie. So I think that there's something in that. And so if you want to say that I believe in a higher power, I guess that does make sense, like you guys have both kind of alluded to, but I don't see it as a personal relationship kind of deal.
Yeah. So I think it'd be interesting to just hear a quick backstory on where each of us come from. I was raised extremely religiously and conservatively. My parents wouldn't let us watch movies with swears in them. We weren't allowed access to the internet when we were home alone. We had to go to church every Sunday, prayer meeting every Wednesday night, and then every Tuesday night we'd have like a Bible study with all the boys from the church, and we'd go to Christian summer camp, vacation Bible school, 5-day clubs, like everything, like literally everything in the book you can imagine. They put us through. And when I was younger, we were talking about this before the stream. I don't know if I ever really strongly believed any of it. It was just what I was presented with, and I didn't question it. It was just kind of, what was given to me, and I went with it. And then as I got older, especially once I left the house, I started really rethinking a lot of things and becoming skeptical of certain things that I had been taught were true. I just started getting less and less specific about what it was I believed. At first I stopped believing in, Adam and Eve and the Tower of Babel and kind of the traditional Bible stories. They started falling away. And I really just believed in the central idea, Jesus came and died for our sins or whatever. And then it kept getting vague and vaguer and vaguer and vaguer until it was finally at the point where you couldn't even tell it was Christianity anymore. So I was like, okay, I've got to stop and really think about what it is I believe. And so then I just, started putting the building blocks back together. I was like, do you believe you live after you die? And, just started putting things back together in that sort of fashion, just from a super basic bottom up style. And I came to the conclusion that I really just didn't strongly believe in anything supernatural. So John, what about you? What was I think all three of us were raised religiously. So
Yeah.
How did it come about with you?
Kind of similar. I mean, I was raised in a Mormon household. So, the movies without swears and no internet when you're home alone, that was something familiar to me growing up. But, about 13, I started really reading the actual Bible and Book of Mormon and started getting into other religious texts. And just the more I read, the more I realized it didn't add up. And it got to a point where, about 16, I was dead sure I was an atheist by that point. I'd been researching everything enough that I was dead certain I was atheist at that point. And I went through a lot of my later adolescent years just being really mad about it, because it just felt like I've been lied to my entire life, and all this time had been wasted on a bunch of bullshit that just wasn't even true. And so it took me a while to kind of go through that similar process, going through based off of what I could experience and what I've seen in my life and everything like that, trying to figure out exactly what my belief system was. And going through that process started to let go of a lot of that anger as I started, coming to terms with everything that I felt it was. And it just came back confirmed, like, yeah, I don't believe in any God, but I'm not really mad about it anymore. I think a lot of people who become atheists can go through that kind of militant, angry atheist phase, and hopefully they eventually grow out of it. I did, but some people take a lot longer than others. So yeah, we're at the point we're at now. It's just not really a belief in God. I have some other things I've, have seen that make me think a certain way, but as far as belief, it's not enough for me to say I believe in it. There's certain things I think because of what I've experienced, but it's kind of where I draw the line.
Yeah, I went through that stage for like 3 months. I remember. I mean, after I decided I was an atheist, it's kind of like when you become a Christian, and you're all excited that you're saved or whatever. I kind of had a very short span that I was the same way about atheism. But what about you, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar thing. I was raised Catholic. So I did the first communion, and I was baptized in the first communion. I was an altar boy, went to Catholic school until 7th grade. But by the time I got to high school, for me, it had kind of been like, all right, I think I might not be, maybe I am, maybe I do believe this. And I kind of struggled with it for a little while because I kind of felt like I wanted to believe it, and there's still part of me that's like, that sees a lot of value in the community. And I think that the ritual that goes along with it is something that is really good for a lot of people. I think that it tends to be good for communities. It's probably has detrimental effects to some individuals. But I think overall it's probably not a bad thing for communities and stuff. And so, I was getting into, extreme metal. So, I am a Catholic listening to Deicide and trying to kind of reconcile the fact that I like the song "Kill the Christians," and Once Upon a Cross was a great record. And I'm like, trying to manage that and come to terms with that, I guess. And it wasn't terribly difficult for me. And I don't feel like music had any kind of influence on what I believed. I think that my beliefs were, I think my lack of belief was because of my understanding of the world and stuff, as opposed to, feeling like I was led out of Christianity or Catholicism by, music or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was a very, very vanilla kind of Catholic, New England Catholic. So it wasn't like Southern Baptist, real religious kind of deal. It was very Northeast kind of, yeah, we're Catholic and we go to church and it's Palm Sunday. And so, go put the stupid cross on Ash Wednesday on your head and, all the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So, something that a lot of religious people told me, especially when I was first starting to dabble in non-belief, was, once you get rid of the cornerstone of Jesus or, whatever religion you're from, you have nothing to stand on anymore. You have no objective truth anymore. And I actually found that to be the opposite. I find that when you're religious, that your truth is actually entirely subjective because it's dependent on what your God says is right or wrong. So, I mean, imagine it this way. If you're a Christian and you believe the things that you believe are right and wrong because God says they're right and wrong, what if Yahweh is not the real God? What if Allah is the real God? Suddenly morality completely shifts. It's completely different. And it's just because you have one ruler saying what you're supposed to do. And John, we did a great video about this, tying atheism into statism. Tying religion into statism and how similar they are, that, because somebody tells you to do this, you have to do it regardless of whether or not it makes sense.
Right.
I started attacking morality from a standpoint of what actually works, what causes people to get along and take care of each other and live longer and prosper. And it's not, it's not democracy. It's not what the largest percentage of the group of people think is right at any given time. I'm talking about objectively what benefits every person in a group or a society or a country or whatever. And you can look back in time and see what different types of religions or different types of cultures, how they've treated people, and how those societies end up turning out, instead of just taking everything out of a book that's a couple thousand years old and applying it as a standard for what's going on today and saying, this guy says this is what we're supposed to do. So, this applies in every single situation. And I want to clarify, I don't mean that nothing in the Bible is good, because I still think there's some great gems of truth in the Bible, about forgiveness.
Don't murder's all right.
Yeah,
that's
pretty good.
I like that one.
Love your family. Is something
yeah.
So
there's
yeah, exactly. Don't steal.
There's plenty of good stuff in there. It's just the idea of using it as the only truth and everything in it as absolutely true with no questioning. But did you have how do you arrive at morality, John? What are your thoughts?
Morality to me is much more subjective, but the thing that boggles my mind with religion is the fact that they had to write that shit down. Like, don't kill people, don't steal. Really, you had to write it down? Like, isn't this stuff that we should just all kind of get? And if you can't, I'm sorry, but you're kind of a dick. So, but I mean, morality, one of the things that's interesting to me about morality from an atheist side versus a religious side is, it is kind of given to you. On the religious side, you're giving it through the Bible, your church leader, whatever the case might be. When you're an atheist, you kind of have to find it for yourself. And then it kind of, at least in my situation, I feel like it makes me that much more convinced in the way I think, my priority being family, myself, my legacy, making sure that I'm leaving a good reputation for my kids to follow through, rather than just being handed it to you and you just kind of take it for granted.
Yeah. What about you, Phil? What do you think? Morality, like objective truth, does it exist? And how do we find it if it does?
I think, that's Jesus Christ, that's a big question.
Yeah. Sorry. There's the rest of the video right there.
I do think that there are things that are, if not actually objectively true, close enough to objectively true for all practical purposes, we can say they're objectively true. I do think that there is a certain amount of subjectivity to most things in reality, or most ways that we interpret reality, because there are so many things that are real that we can't perceive, whether it be electromagnetic fields, subatomic particles, there's all these things in the universe that we can't perceive at all. Multiple dimensions they talk about. I think there's supposed to be like 11 dimensions, and it's not like, I'm not talking about like Buck Rogers kind of dimensions. I'm talking about like, when you're getting into complex mathematics and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that are real, that are just as real as the solid matter that we see, or gravity, that we can't perceive. So everything to some extent is subjective, but I think that it is reasonable to say that it's immoral to murder someone. I think that it's reasonable to say it's immoral to take someone else's property. I think that it's reasonable to say that morality can be loosely described as, the do unto others rule, do unto others as you would have done to you. If you treat people that way, you're probably within what are reasonable boundaries of what one would call moral. If you, that's why honesty That's part of why honesty is good. You know, you want to be honest with people so that way they know that when you say something, they can trust you and rely on you. And that extends to, that makes for good relationships, first of all, but it also extends to society. If you have a low trust society, then you end up having a state enforcing things. If you have a high trust society, you don't need a state to enforce things. The state becomes something that, you know, or the state can be a smaller state if you have a high trust society, whereas if you have a low trust society, you're going to have a state. You're going to want to have a state because you're going to need more courts for redress of grievances. You're going to need more enforcement. You're going to, you know, all these things that come with not trusting people. And that boils down to, very simply, be honest with each other. If you're honest all the time, you know, like, again, I'm because of the kind of the context surrounding this subject, I'm probably going to bring up Peterson frequently, but Jordan Peterson has a good rule, which is like, you know, tell the truth or at least don't lie, you know. And if you can do that and make that make that something that is part of your personality, so that way people know, no matter who you're dealing with, whether it's someone that's annoying that you just want to get away from or someone that you're very close to, if you say something, you're not BSing them. You're not making stuff up, and you're not, you know, they can rely on, you know, they can reliably say that's probably pretty close to what actually is going to happen, or he's going to try to make happen, or actually did happen. You know, if you can do that, then people can, and you, again, you extend that to the greater society, and most people are like that. You have a more prosperous and productive society than if you have one where people are kind of lying and people are calling the cops on each other and busybodied and you know. So that's kind of where I think morality, or at least how I kind of understand morality.
Yeah. So thus far in the conversation, we've kind of been going in a circle, but from here on out, just jump in if you have anything interesting you want to say. We don't need to be, we don't need to go in turn anymore. So something you just said there that I find really interesting, and is something that I thought about a lot too, was, you know, something that's close enough to objective truth, because everything is subjective to a certain point. If there's a multiverse, you could have different universes with different laws of nature, different laws, you know, I mean, so you have to, everything to a point is sort of subjective. And a lot of people would use that when they were talking to me about God, because they'd say, you don't know if what you're touching or what you're seeing or what you're feeling is true. And I would say, yeah, of course I don't. But I mean, you don't either. You know, your belief in God is just as based on your personal experience and what you can see and what you've heard and what you've touched, as mine is. You know, like that's all we have to deal with. We don't know anything beyond what we can see, touch, hear, taste. You know, I mean, that's your toolbox that you have to observe the natural world and come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, I think that you know, if you're dealing with trying to talk to someone who has faith, right, or is discussing faith, I suppose to some extent we all have faith in something. Like, I have faith that, you know, tomorrow morning the sun's going to rise in the east, because I've seen it a lot.
Right.
Whereas if you're talking about, you know, a personal God, if you have faith and you tell me you have faith in them because God has personally spoken to you, I'm going to have a completely different reaction than if you say, I have faith that if I jump off this chair, I'm going to, you know, head towards the floor as opposed to float up to the ceiling, you know?
Right.
So I think that, you know, as far as faith goes, I think that it's, for when it comes to religion, a lot of times it is synonymous with hope. And I don't think that that's a useful way to understand the world, you know?
Yeah. The broader topic here was, you know, godlessness in the liberty movement. And I've thought about this a lot, and I had a video with Peter Quinones a few weeks ago, and he talked about it a little bit. And then I had Clint from Liberty Lockdown the other day, and he also had a comment on it. And he was basically saying, you know, there's a lot of atheism in the liberty movement, and it's not an inspiring message to most people. Like, if you're just telling them that this is all there is, you're going to die and you're going to rot after you die, and this is all temporary, then it really doesn't matter if there's nothing bigger than just us. And I made the argument that it really just depends on how you pitch it, how you look at things. Because to me, if this is just a temporary life and then there's an eternal afterlife where everything is great, that doesn't compel me to try to fix this world very much, because who cares? I mean, I'm just here for, however long until I die, and then I'm gone, and I get to, yeah.
Just how long? When can I get out of here to the good place?
Yeah. I mean, and then if someone dies, who cares? Like all these wars that are happening, it's like, okay, I mean, they're going to their afterlife. Who cares? If, the environment, if you care about the environment, who cares? Like the world's going to burn and we're going to be up in heaven rejoicing. I mean, so to me, if this is all we have, it makes it way more important. It's kind of like fiat money. Why is fiat money so worthless? It's because there's no cap on it. It's endless. I mean, you can just print it off. You have an infinite supply. And so it completely devalues what you have, because if you have a limited supply, or if you have something like gold that is finite and rare, it makes it extremely valuable. If you have eternal life, especially if it's not this one, if it's one that just comes after this, where everything is fine and dandy, why give a shit about anything that's happening here now? Like why care about the state of the government? Why care about standard of living? Like, I mean, it just doesn't matter, because it would just be this temporary exercise we have to get through to achieve the prize.
Yeah. I mean, I went to, I was in Hawaii, and I was hanging out with some friends and that are from Hawaii that I just kind of met. And they were like, oh, you should go check out this, they didn't say that it was a temple, but it was a Mormon temple. And so we went, and it's beautiful. There's all the flowers and stuff. And it was me and my ex-wife at the time. And we're kind of like, we're both atheists, and didn't really realize that it was a Mormon temple at the time. And so we go in, and they're kind of talking to us and started talking a little bit about religion. And so, we're doing our best to be polite and stuff, but at the same time, I'm not going to bullshit them. I'm like, I don't believe in God. And the girl that was talking to us was like, doesn't that seem sad to you? And about, if you just die and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I kind of feel like that's what makes it special, because if you die and then you go to heaven, then, what's the point of this time that we have on earth? What's the, what good is it that you're literally just like in the waiting room to get into like the main event, which is like an eternity in heaven? So it's like, I kind of feel like that's, like the fact that we are finite, that we will end, is kind of what makes us special. And she was kind of like, well, yeah, but I still wouldn't want to die. And I'm like, well, I'm not looking forward to it or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I like living. So
see, for me, like, I always think it's funny when people kind of go on that dark and dreary path when they're thinking of atheism, and they think, oh, that's just it. You think that this is your one life. That's all there is. There's nothing else out there. Because really, atheism is just a lack of belief in God. Everything after that is up to interpretation. The only commonality really is just that there's no God. So there can be a whole bunch of room for a whole bunch of other things that can be just as amazing, just as wonderful, or even more so than what you think would happen when you are a religious person. But people hear atheists and they just think, completely deny God, completely deny an afterlife. There's no possibility. You're just a depressing type of person to be around.
Or they think you're atheism and they think like, like Lil Nas's new shoes and like devil worshiper as an atheist.
Right.
Like that's significantly different, right?
It
is. although if you listen to like the Anton LaVey version of Satanism, it's very much like atheism. It's like, it's a very, or maybe an egoist, like a very selfish atheism where they kind of are just like, we kind of worship ourselves and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, and then I guess they just wear spooky clothes. They're like atheists with spooky clothes, and that just why too much like goth atheists.
Yeah,
because there's an actual club for those. There's not really one for atheists. It's not like we have a place where we get together and meet and discuss what we all agree on. We don't have any articles of confederation.
Oh, I guess you guys haven't heard about it yet. I'll just stay quiet about that one.
Just text me.
I think just like libertarians have really bad messengers and have a bad taste. Everyone has a bad taste for it in their mouth because of certain people. I think atheism is similar
because of autism, because of all the autism. That's why.
Yeah,
because we're all kind of on the spectrum.
For sure. I feel the same way about atheism, though. Richard Dawkins. I like some of what he says, but that guy is just militant. He's obviously got a bone to pick. It's not so much that he's got his own ideology that he's pushing. It's like he hates religion, he hates Christians, he hates like all this stuff, and it's really ugly. And it's like, no, that's not what all of us are like. Like
I thought he was real smart when I was 18, and then I got into my 20s and I realized, no, that's not for me.
I think that you hear people like Dawkins or like Sam Harris that have they see religion as a hindrance to mankind. And I'm a little, again, I bring up Peterson, and I'm a little more partial to his understanding where it's like, religion evolved with people. Religion is ubiquitous throughout all cultures, all groups, and even now in the US with the alleged secular society that we have, there are people that look at the state in the same way that other people look at religion. And you see it on Twitter, because Twitter's where the most devout statists are, but they are ready to go looking for a fight, and they're pro whichever team. There's pro government on both sides. I tend to have negative interactions with more people that are Democrats and on the left more than anything else, but that's probably just because I lean a little to the right side culturally. But you see how ideological it is and how committed to the way that people talk about Dr. Fauci and the way that people talk about Joe Biden and the way that the media talks about Joe Biden. It has all the trappings of a religion. And you hear someone like James Lindsay talk about it, and the way he outlines and describes it. Lindsay really, and Peter Boghossian's another guy that really kind of makes this argument that the state and things like the woke ideology, those are the new religions because the old religions have fallen out of favor, but that doesn't mean that the new religions aren't religions. They are they share all of the same common, a lot of the same characteristics as religion. So, and I think that the atheist, when the atheist movement was kind of a thing, maybe 10 years ago, there were a lot of people that were religiously atheist, and they treated their atheism the same and a worship of the state as a byproduct as a religion. And they're looking for religious people to go ahead and smack down the same way that Christians were looking to go and find the non-believers and just show them that they got, their books got all the stuff in it. And,
right.
And so I think that's something that is it's part of human beings. And I assume that I probably have the same kind of a few of the same knee-jerk reactions that people that are strongly religious do as well, just because I'm a person. But I think that it's more a part of us and has evolved with us far more than it has been stuff that was fed to us or forced on us by other people, by society or whatever. I think it's something that's kind of innate to human beings.
See, that actually played a large part in me coming away from the more militant, angry side of atheism, where I was just mad at people for having lied to me how I felt my whole life, is because I started seeing that type of thing where people who were religious were claiming to be atheists and then treating the state as their new religion. And you see that, and it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. Being an atheist, yeah, sometimes maybe you want people to not believe in religion anymore because you think it's the correct way, but some people are just going to be religious no matter what. And if you take away their religion, they might replace it with something worse, like the state.
Yeah. And that to kind of riff off that idea, the way that like if you look at like the Communist Manifesto or a lot of socialist countries, they want to remove gods, and they don't like people having religion, because if they have religion, that becomes a barrier to the state influencing them, which is part of the reason why, like, they don't want, they want to minimize the family unit, or if there's state worship, they want to minimize the family unit, and they don't want to have a lot of religious people, because that becomes a hindrance to worshiping the state and taking the state's word for things, and so building on that idea.
We're seeing it now.
We are. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Right now, with everything going on, it's questions that, or answers that cannot be questioned, is applying to the state as we're moving further and further away from traditional religion in this country. The state becoming that new religion, political parties becoming that new religion.
And you, again, I bring up Twitter because you see that when you question stuff, you don't even have to be like, so for just as an example, like masks and not wearing masks. If you question, wait a minute, I'm getting a vaccine, why do I have to wear a mask after I got the vaccine? The replies from people that you'll get are they're angry that you would even question. Yep. They're insulted, they're aggressive. And it's like, I mean, when my understanding of vaccines for all my life has been, you get the vaccine and then you don't have to worry about getting sick anymore.
That's
right?
What happened with smallpox when I went to Iraq. They gave us the smallpox vaccine and then we could go. You
don't have to worry. Like, there's not a lot of people tooling around in America that have polio, right? You don't get the polio vaccine and then they say, careful, now you might get polio. Mm-hmm. You got the vaccine. Like, that's just kind of so to think that, and so maybe there's new conditions with the new vaccines. Fine, fair enough. I'm not a doctor. I don't make vaccines. I don't know crap about it. But if there is a new condition with this vaccine, to assume that people should automatically know it, when most people's experiences with vaccine has been, get the vaccine, you don't have to worry about it anymore. And then if you talk to people on Twitter, the replies are, oh, that's so dumb, and or why don't you know this, and why don't you know? Well, why should you know that? And most people's experience with vaccine is you get the vaccine and then you don't have to worry about it. If there's something about these vaccines that make them different, fair enough, maybe it is, but asking the question about it doesn't make someone a bad person. But there are people that are, again, behave as if they're religiously motivated and as if you're questioning their God. And as if why would you question the state? Why would you question it? Well, I don't know. Maybe I looked at the history of the state, and maybe literally a year ago, we were being told don't wear masks, and then they said now you have to wear masks, and now they're saying wear 3 masks even after you've got the vaccine. Maybe it's because the state hasn't been all that great in their messaging. Maybe, So I mean, and again, I'm not trying to start some kind of conflict with anyone watching this about whether or not masks work or not, or whether you should or shouldn't. I'm just a guy that yells at a stick in a band, so I don't know. But questioning is questioning something, and you get people that have this reaction about the questions. It's just like you see from people that are strongly religious, and you say, was Mary really a virgin? Whoa, will that start a fight? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can be a non-theist, but it's hard to say that you're not religious if you're a statist. You might not believe in you definitely believe in a higher power, and you definitely have a religion. You might not believe that there's a man up in the clouds, but does it really matter that you don't believe that, because you have arrived at the same conclusion and you're living the same way? You're not thinking for yourself. You've said this a lot, John, like you can't really call yourself an atheist if you're a statist. I mean, because you're religious.
Exactly. Because you've just replaced God with the state. Like, you're not an atheist. Quit calling yourself that. It's as stupid as democratic socialist.
Oh boy,
Let's go.
yeah, that's another.
Let's go. Let's go.
I'm in Greek. Stop appropriating my culture. That's all I'm gonna say.
So here's another interesting thing, and I've been talking about it a lot with people lately. Is if you're a libertarian who just hates the state and that's all that exists about you, you're just there to oppose the state. You don't have any message beyond that about peace and cooperation and generosity or whatever. Like, who really cares what you have to say? If you just exist to oppose something, then your existence, isn't that interesting to me. And I feel the same way about atheism. Like, if atheism is all your belief is, if your belief system is just that there's no God and you don't have any philosophy about how you're supposed to live and how you can live in a functioning society and how you can get along with people, then it really doesn't matter. But, I've also said that the reason libertarians are so vehemently anti-state is because there's so much state. And so the reason I've been, atheist in my messaging is because there's so much religiosity in culture too. And I just want people to think for themselves. And if that helps, if they still arrive at Christianity or Islam or whatever, like, that's great. But I just want people to question things and try to arrive at their own conclusions in an honest way, instead of just taking somebody else's word for something and giving it 0-second thoughts.
Do you guys think that overall, and this is kind of a weird question because historically, religion and the state have kind of been one and the same. The idea of a separated state and religion is new, and even in the U.S. history, there was no official religion, but only for the first 100 years, everybody was some kind of Christian.
Right.
For maybe it was the first 150 years, maybe possibly even first 200 years, everybody was some kind of Christian. So do you think that liberty and a society that has a very significantly limited state is possible without some kind of religion attached to it?
So I'm going to butcher this, but like half of the founding fathers were not religious, right? So Benjamin Franklin wasn't. Thomas Jefferson was a deist, right? Like he was the idea that there's a very removed God. So he was not religious, really. I mean, he believed in some sort of higher power.
They all had a very Christian sense of virtue, though. Because they all said that you can't be a virtuous society. You can't have liberty without virtue.
Right, but I would say that too. I mean, and I think all three of us would say that, even though we're not religious. So I think it's I don't think you need religion to get there. I think almost, how do I say this? I think thinking that you need religion to stay there actually sort of holds humanity back, because they feel like if we get rid of these ancient ideas, then we're just going to start murdering each other. And I kind of equate that to what Ron Paul said about legalizing heroin. He was like, if you legalize heroin, how many people here are going to go shoot up tonight? None of you are, right? Like, so I think it's this, I think it's a false idea that we need a God figure in order to not persecute each other and in order to have higher goals, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Nietzsche was the guy that coined the phrase God is dead, or the something like that. I'm not sure exactly what the phrase was. And there's a lot of people that quote him as some kind of atheist triumph. But when Nietzsche said that, like, they don't complete the idea, because he went on to say, and we don't, and this is paraphrasing, I don't know the exact wording, but it was, we don't know what that means. We don't know how human beings are going to handle that. And then there is an argument that because of Nietzsche's declaration or prediction that the communist states arose and fascism arose, because you had monarchies that generally had some kind of religion attached to them, and there was some kind of loose story about the monarchs having their power imbued from God somehow. And you still have that today in, you know, Saudi Arabia and a lot of the Middle Eastern countries. Their monarchs say that they have their power because it comes from God. When you remove that, then you had the rise of fascism and communism, and those suck. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like they and, you know, Nietzsche was like, you know, we don't know what that means. And it turns out that it could have been, or the lack of religion could have been why we had, you know, why the 20th century was the most deadly century in human history. Now, granted, the death of God coincided with industrialization. So when things industrialized, that meant also the industrialization of war. So, you know, and the industrialization of murder. So that, you know, they coincided. But I wonder if the U.S. is kind of seeing a similar thing going on, whereas you've got people that no longer believe in God, and they've made the state their God. And you look at the way that they're looking at the people that are traditionally religious, which are the conservatives and people on the right, and the religious people in the U.S., and they are throwing those people into the group of outcasts. Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables, all the things that, you know, that you call the basket of deplorables, they were all people that just were outside of acceptable society. And when you have a country that is so steeped in political correctness, if you are politically incorrect, then you must be the other. And I wonder, you know, I mean, I'm hoping that we don't see it here, but part of the reason why I moved to Texas is because of my concerns. I wonder if, you know, we will get to a point where there, you know, could be the non-religious persecuting the religious in the U.S., you know, and I'm unsure that I have seen anything that convinces me it's impossible. I mean, maybe it's unlikely, or maybe, you know, maybe it's more likely that it doesn't happen, but I certainly can't say that I rule it out, because the vitriol that comes from people that are against religious people, and because we talked about, you know, people that are, you know, emotionally anti-religion, which we've all kind of said we're not, but like the people that are really, you know, that look at the state as their religion, even though they don't admit it. The vitriol when they describe people that are other, you know, the people that they look at as those religious people, the Christians that are more, you know, religiously Christian, not the lip service Christians. It's pretty brutal. It's pretty hate-filled. It's pretty ugly. And, you know, I mean, I'm not a Christian, but I definitely would rather hang out with Mormons than, you know, angry liberals in New York. You know?
I think we're kind of already seeing it, in all honesty. I mean, the last year we've had people wanting to go back to church, and they've been chewed up, spit out just for wanting to go to church, because everybody else is so afraid of this virus that it seems like we're already moving towards that direction. I mean, here in Utah, it's the most religious state in the nation, pretty much, and everything got shut down for religion. And I was one of the few people, being one of the most prominent atheists in the state, saying that the churches should be able to open up and people should be able to go. But instead, they were all getting shut down. And if you wanted to go back, you were just torn apart for wanting to practice your religion, which is a guaranteed right in this country.
Yeah, and you mentioned the or there's also like the way that the some of the Jewish people in New York were treated. That's really,
it's pretty scary.
Some fucked up shit, dude.
Scary.
Yeah,
like not cool kind of stuff, you know. So,
well, I mean, even being not religious myself, some of this stuff that we're seeing is looking very similar to some stuff we've seen before, and we know exactly where it goes. And no, I do not want to experience that in my lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, the solution here is individualism. It's not religion. It's not belief in a higher power. You talk about this all the time, Phil, and it's so important that once we lose sight of each other's personhood, of each other's individualism, that's when we start to otherize people, and that enables us to dehumanize people. So I think you can see that that can happen with or without religion. You've seen it both ways.
Yeah.
Like the Spanish Inquisition,
Sure.
that was otherizing people with religion pretty easily, like throwing the Christians in the Colosseum, that's otherizing. So you don't need religion or atheism for that to happen. So the key here is really valuing every person as an individual. And to me, that's the beauty of libertarianism. Libertarianism is about the individual. That's what sets it apart from every other ideology. It's about your individual rights, your property, your life. It's not about any certain collective, because that's where we start to get into the weeds and we start losing sight of what's important.
Yeah, I agree.
Essentially, it just comes down to, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim or atheist or Christian or pagan or Hindu or Buddhist. If we're not all free to practice our religions, then none of us are.
Yeah. The individual, I think, like Reed was saying, that the individual has to take primacy, because if the individual is the most important thing that we protect, then you can't help but protect rights, people's rights. That protecting people's rights becomes a byproduct of protecting individuals. So if you look at people as an individual that is deserving of protection, if there is a legitimate role for the state, then it is to protect the individual from the rest of the country, protect the individual's rights. And if you have a state that does that, then it will create the byproduct of protecting everybody's rights. If you treat all people as individuals that have value, and that their rights are inalienable or sacrosanct, or whatever, however you want to describe it, but their rights come from their humanity and that they cannot be violated even by the state, then you will, as a byproduct, protect all people's rights. And I think that if we can make that argument in a compelling way, and I find that compelling, but if we can make that argument, I think that it is a something that isn't just compelling, but it's something that will produce good results as well. It'll produce results that people can see, tangible good results, So
yeah, I think that the idea that if you don't believe in anything supernatural means that you can't think there's anything beyond the control of humanity. I don't think that's the case. So take mathematics. Mathematics is a human construct to a point, right? Like we came up with 2 and 2 and 4 or whatever, but we can't just change the rules of it to fit our needs. If we decide that 2 + 2 is 5, suddenly you've got a whole bunch of issues on your hands, right? Like trying to make larger equations isn't going to work anymore. You're not going to be able to do construction anymore. Like everything is just going to come crumbling down. So even in a naturalistic world, there are forces that are outside of your control. So, like economics, even though that's a very human construct, money, markets, all that, they still follow rules that we can't control. You're seeing us try to control them right now, and it's not working very well. So I think that
$30 trillion in debt.
I think that a naturalistic way of approaching morality is individualism, because once it's like I just said, Phil, once you respect the individual, the outcome is going to be what it is. And you're not necessarily controlling that. That's just the natural outcome. I think in our first podcast we did, you were talking about how capitalism isn't really a system. It's a reaction to a certain set of ideas. And I think that freedom is the reaction to individualism. Once you respect the individual, things will fall into place, because once you I think a society that values the individual over the collective will succeed. And if you have a society where you value the collective over the individual, both the collective and the individual will fall, they'll fail.
Yeah. Yeah, so, if you have a society that values the collective over the individual, you can't help but oppress individuals. You can't help but harm individuals. Like, that is a byproduct of that type of society. So,
yeah. You got anything to add to that, John? Or
I just think we're in a really big struggle trying to get to that point, because unfortunately, it just seems like a lot of people don't want that responsibility that comes with freedom. They don't like the idea of individualism, and there's people who know all too well that individuals are harder to control than collectives. So it's an uphill battle to try and get to a point where we can narrow it down to where we can all agree to focus on the rights of the individuals rather than one group superseding the interest of a smaller group, just because of that fact that people are lazy. They don't want that responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, a lot of libertarians talk about hitting the Rothbard button. I'm not sure that doing that right now would do a ton of good. I think it would do some. Like, I think the state is the reason we have a lot of issues, but I'm not stupid enough to think that if the state went away, everything would be fine. I mean, I think libertarianism is more of a philosophy than a political party, and you need to get people to start thinking about individuals and start thinking about taking care of each other and themselves. That if we were to just instantly go there tomorrow, it would be a catastrophe. I mean, I think you have to, it's a philosophy that you have to make appealing to the masses. So that's kind of our job going forward.
Absolutely. Because right now it looks mostly like, you know, just get rid of the state will be okay. We have to find what's going to come after and what we're building towards rather than just getting rid of, because we got rid of religion and it got replaced with the state. So what's going to happen if we just get rid of the state? We have to have some type of plan here. We have to have that conversation about what we can actually all agree on, what we really want to see being built up to respect those rights of the individual, what that would really look like, and start having those conversations. Because if we just go with get rid of the state, we might, sometimes the devil you know is better than one you don't.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're at an hour, so we'll close it off right there. Thanks both of you guys for coming on. I'm going to try to be doing more of these because this actually is half of what my show is supposed to be about, the naturalist capitalist. I talk about the capitalist half most of the time, but the whole idea behind it was really trying to get people to think outside the box, you know, think for themselves, question things. And I think that people in power, whether they're religious leaders or political leaders, that they use fear to divide us and keep themselves in power. So, you know, the most powerful thing you can do is think for yourself. So I'll be doing more of these, and I wanted to start with two other people who kind of think similarly to the way I do, but I'll be having Christians on to talk about it. I have done that in the past, but it's an avenue I want to go down a little bit more. But I'll give you each an opportunity just to say what's going on in the near future for you and where people can follow you if you're up to anything. So, John, you go first.
On social media, most channels are at Gear 6 Alpha, or A for those who don't speak military lingo. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram. Twitter's where I'm most active. We're kicking up YouTube soon. But yeah, stay tuned. We're in the process of moving and reevaluating a few things. 2020 got crazy. And so I am switching up my investment and everything accordingly because things got way too crazy there and I'm not taking any chances. So follow me on social media and we'll figure out the next steps from there.
I am Phil That Remains on Twitter. You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Phil That Remains. I stream on Twitch Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. That's twitch.tv/Phil That Remains. You can follow the band on Instagram at All That Remains, Facebook, All That Remains. We're going to be on tour this year, just so long as the government doesn't care not just so long as there are enough states that are open for us to plan a proper tour so that we can go on tour for a month. We have a tour planned. We have a record plan next year. So all that remains online.com. That's all of my stuff. And I'm on Twitter. I'm Phil That Remains. That's where I'm mostly annoyingly libertarian. Everywhere else, it's mostly it's banned stuff. On Twitter, if you want the libertarian stuff, go to Twitter, and I'll argue with people about why taxation is theft and stuff.
All right, guys. Well, I think it was a great conversation. Thanks to both of you for coming on, and I'll have both of you on again at some point.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.